Okay, guys, so today I am reading How the King of Elfhame Learned to Hate Stories, and I'm reading the third story in the book. And the third story is called The King of Elfhame Hates Everyone and hates everything and almost everyone, something along those lines. So that's what we'll be doing today. Also, I just want to show you some of the pictures for anyone who hasn't watched my first two videos. So these stories aren't... there's going to be Cruel Prince spoilers because this is connected to the Cruel Prince series. The title itself is kind of a spoiler, actually. So if you haven't read those and you're going to and you don't like spoilers, then watch this video after you've read them. But yeah. So it's a very interesting book. It has pictures, so I'm going to be turning it around a lot. I had a realization that some people may want to see the map before I read so that they have an idea of where everything's taking place. So this is the map. It's hard to see from this, but if you can see it, there you go. So yeah, this is the third story. The third story is you kind of need to read the second story, but to get some of what he's referencing, but overall you can understand it just fine without having listened to the second story. So anyways, this is The Prince of Elfhame Hates Almost Everything and Everyone. There's a beautiful picture. Now we have this. It was not so many years after Cardan found himself staring at the polished door of his eldest brother's home. On it was a massive carving of a sinister face. As he watched, its wooden mouth twisted up into an even more sinister smile. "You can't frighten me," thought Cardan. "Welcome, my princes," said the door, swinging open to admit him and Belkin into the ominously named Hollow Hall. As Cardan passed through, a wooden eye gave him a companionable wink. "You can't befriend me either," he thought. Belkin led his youngest brother to a room full of furniture covered in velvet and silk. A human woman stood in a corner dressed in drab gray. Her hair streaked with silver and pulled back into a tight bun. A worn leather strap lay across her palm. Ta-da! "So I am supposed to make you into a proper Prince of Elfhame," Belkin said, letting his great coat with its fur collar drop to the floor, kicking it aside to be picked up by some servant, and then settling himself on one of the low and luxuriant couches. "Or a delightfully improper one," Cardan said, hoping to sound like the sort of brother who might be worth taking under Belkin's wing. He led one of the largest and most influential circles at court, the Grackles, who were committed to merriment and decadence. It was well known that the courtiers who attended the revels in Hollow Hall were indolent pleasure-seekers. Maybe there was room for Cardan among them. He was indolent. He liked seeking pleasure. Belkin smiled. "That's almost charming, little brother. Indeed, you ought to flatter me, because if I hadn't taken you in, you might have been sent to be fostered in one of the low courts. There were many places where an inconsequential Prince of Elfhame would be the source of much diversion, none of it comfortable for you." Cardan didn't flinch, but for the first time he understood that as terrible as things had been up to now, something worse might yet be ahead. Ever since Dane had tricked him so that the arrow that slew the lover of his friend Sin Shao seemed to have belonged to Cardan, ever since his mother had been sent to the Tower Forgetting for his supposed crime, and Eldred had refused to hear the truth, ever since he had been sent from the palace in disgrace, Cardan had felt like the boy in Aslog's story. His heart was stone. Belkin continued, "I brought you here because you are one of the few people who see Dane for what he is, and are therefore valuable to me. But that doesn't mean you're not a disgrace. You'll choose clothing suitable to your station and no longer wear garments that are dirty and torn. You will stop scavenging what you can find from the kitchens or stealing from banquets. but sit at a table with cutlery and use it. You will learn some modicum of swordplay, and you will attend the palace school where I expect you to do what they ask of you." Carden curled his lip. He had been forced into a blue doublet by one of the pale palace servants, and aggressively groomed down to the combing of the tuft of hair at the end of his tail. But the clothing was old. Loose threads hung from his cuffs, and the fabric of his trousers was worn and thin at the knees. But since it had never bothered him before, he refused to let it bother him now. "All will be as you say, brother." Belkin's smile grew lazy. "Now I will show you what happens if you fail. This is Margaret. Margaret, come here." He gestured to the human woman with the silvery hair. She went toward them, although something was unsettling about the way she moved. It was as though she were sleepwalking. "What's the matter with her?" Carden asked. Belkin yawned. "She's ensorrelled, a victim of her own foolish bargain." Carden had little experience of mortals. Some came through the high court, musicians and artists and lovers who had wished for magic and found it. And there were the twin mortal children that Grand General Maddock had stolen and insisted on treating as though they were his own born daughters, kissing them on the tops of their heads and resting his clawed fingers protectively on their shoulders. "Humans are like mice," Belkin went on, "dead before they can learn how to be canny. Why shouldn't they serve us? It gives their short lives some meaning." Carden looked at Margaret. The emptiness of her eyes still unnerved him. The strap in her hand unnerved him more. "She is going to punish you," Belkin said. "And do you know why?" "I am certain you are about to enlighten me," answered Carden with a sneer. It was almost a relief to know that curbing his tongue wouldn't help, as he'd never been very good at it. "Because I won't dirty my hands," Belkin said. "Better you experience the humiliation of being beaten by a creature who ought to be your inferior, and every time you think of how disgusting mortals are, with their pocked skin and decaying teeth and their fragile little minds, I want you to think of this moment when you were lower than even that. And I want you to remember how willingly you submitted, because if you don't, you will have to leave Hollow Hall in my mercy. Now, little brother, you must choose a future." It turned out that Carden didn't have a heart of stone after all. As he removed his shirt and sank to his knees, as he fisted his hands and tried not to cry out when the strap fell, he burned with hatred. Hatred for Dane, for his father, for all the siblings who didn't take him in, and the one who did. For his mother, who spat at his feet as she was led away. For stupid, disgusting mortals. For all of Elfhame and everyone in it. Hate that was so bright and hot that it was the first thing that truly warmed him. Hate that felt so good that he welcomed being consumed by it. Not a heart of stone, but a heart of fire. Under Belkin's tutelage, Carden remade himself. He learned to drink a vast variety and quantity of wines, learned how to take powders that made him laugh and fall down and feel nothing at all. He visited the weavers and tailors with his brother, choosing garments with cuffs of feathers and exquisite embroidery, with collars as sharp as the points of his ears and fabrics as soft as the tuft of his tail. A tail he tucked away, for it showed too much of what he schooled his face to hide. A poisonous flower displays its bright colors, a cobra flares its hood. Predators ought not to shrink from extravagance, and that was what he was being polished and punished into being. And when he returned to the palace, dressed magnificently, behaving with perfect deference toward Eldred, shown off by his brother as though he were a tamed hawk, everyone pretended he was no longer in disgrace. Belkin relaxed his rules toward Carden after that, allowing him to do what he wished so long as he didn't draw the ire of their father. That spring, Elfhame bustled with preparations for a state visit from Queen Orla, and had little time to consider an errant prince anyway. There were whispers that if Orla, known for her brutal and swift conquest over her rivals in the undersea, didn't already control everything beneath the waves, she soon would, and she had announced that she wanted to foster her daughter on land in the High Court of Elfhame. An honor and an opportunity, if someone was clever enough to exploit it. Orla hopes the girl will marry one of Eldred's offspring, Prince Cardan overheard a courtier say, and then the queen will scheme to make that child the next ruler of Elfheim, so her daughter, Nikasa, may rule land and sea, after which the spouse will likely meet an accident, put in another. But if that was what some thought, others saw only the immediate benefits of such an alliance. Belkin and two of his sisters determined they would be the ones to befriend Princess Nikasa, imagining that friendship could change their balance of power in the family. Cardan thought they were fools. Their father already favored his second-born child, Princess Elowin, and if she wasn't chosen as his heir, it would be Prince Dane, with his machinations. None of the others had the shadow of a chance. Not that he cared. He decided he would be thoroughly unpleasant to the girl from the sea, no matter how Belkin punished him for it. He would not have anyone think he was a part of this farce. He would not give her the opportunity to disdain him. By the time Queen Orla and Princess Nikasa arrived, I have no idea if I'm saying her name right, by the way. I don't know how you're supposed to say it, but that's how I'm saying it. So, if you know how to say it, comment below, because I don't. I'm just guessing. Princess Nikasa arrived, and Queen Orla. The great hall was draped in blue cloth. Dishes of cold sliced scallops and tiny shrimp quivered on trays of ice beside honeycomb and oat cakes. Musicians had taken up playing merfolk songs on their instruments, the music strange to Cardan's ear. He wore a doublet of blue velvet. Gold hoops hung from his ears and rings covered his fingers. His hair, dark as the shoes of a blackthorn, tumbled around